we've heard a lot of interesting things so far, and we're going to hear some more interesting things. But what about the cost of all this good stuff? Last year, the Stewardship Committee, we were talking about how can we get our clients and developers to do what we think is the right thing environmentally. I think everybody in this room has probably had the experience of talking to your client, and you mentioned the word sustainability, maybe particularly to a developer that's, they have to make money on their project. And so as soon as you mention something that's green or sustainable, they kind of tune out. So we need to come up with a way so that we can talk to them in a different way. How can we make the discussion not about sustainability, even though that's what it's really about, and talk about cost, maybe profit? So then the other question comes up as to, well, what kind of client or developer are you talking to? Are you talking to a developer that's going to develop the project and hang on to it for years? And in that case, the return on investment that many of us talk about that occurs down the road, sometimes maybe even 15 years, for that person, maybe they're willing to wait that long. But what about the developer that doesn't? What about the developer that, and I'm putting clients in there too with developers that aren't just developers. What about the developer that's going to build the project and sell it before occupancy or right after? Very often, they couldn't care less about the return on investment 5 years from now, right? Unless, of course, they realize that that could potentially raise the value, the selling price of their development or their project. But many of them don't look at it that way. They don't look that far. So we have to find ways to show them that our understanding of sustainable development can improve their bottom line on day one. So how do we do that? Well, we took a project that my office had worked on, but we didn't have the opportunity to be involved in the site planning. We were just asked to do, unfortunately, just the planting and irrigation. And that project was this project. You see the whole thing? Yeah. And we thought, well, if we can take this project that was designed with very traditional methods, traditional materials, traditional approach to addressing stormwater management, and put together a group of people to look at it in a different way, maybe we can come up with a better argument. So in October, the Stewardship Committee put on a really fun, interesting, probably the most fun any of us have ever had in our lives. We put on a charrette, a design charrette. That wasn't a joke. We put on a design charrette where we invited landscape architects, civil engineers, landscape contractors, and landscape architecture students to gather together, similarly to what we are today, except it was in a certainly different venue, and we broke up into 5 teams. Each team had at least one person from every discipline, and we had this brainstorming design session. And out of that came some slides that I'm going to show you in a second here. And it was actually very interesting solutions that they came up with. And we looked at the best designs. And by the way, they only had about 3 hours to come up with this design. This project here is about 11 acres and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, has 7 buildings on it. Just thought I'd count them out for you in case you couldn't see it or if you're counting impaired. And my joke sent me off my track, so I don't know where I am now. No, really. Anyway, so they presented their work, and we took the best ones and put them into one more detailed, actually we drew it in CAD, so it was more detailed, so we could do some area takeoffs. So let me show you first what happened. You'll notice on this project how the buildings are located. There's a ton of parking. In this, the mouse doesn't work when you're in PowerPoint. That area here was the only large landscape area that was on the project. And so here are some photographs that gives you the thrilling experience that we had. And one of the designs, they all had interesting solutions. These were all done with manual drafting tools. I'm kidding, it was all freehand. They were just learning. And another project, we had 5 solutions. This is an image of one of the teams working on the design together. This is an image of that project being presented. We took out the slides that showed people fighting. There was a lot of that. It was a little embarrassing. Some of the solutions showed more detention basins than others. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. This particular project, which is the one that's most similar to what we ended up going with, had permeable pavers going through the courtyards, creating a nice little space here between the buildings, and going across, taking the water into this bioswale here and to a larger pond there. And from these, we came up with this design. Now, I'm going to interrupt myself for just a second and tell you that this study that we're doing is just the beginning of many cost analysis studies that we're going to do. So because we're going to look at so many different aspects of sustainable return on investments, we thought we'd break it up into different kind of manageable increments so we could get the information out to everybody. So we looked at paving. Now, much like today, Belgard helped support that event. They gave a nice lecture at lunchtime, and after hearing everybody's presentations, they shared with us what could be done if the whole project had been done with permeable pavement. Remember this project here, I'm not picking on it because it was actually the one closest to what we went with, but most people thought that, well, permeable pavers are more expensive than concrete or asphalt, so we need to use them sparingly. And you're going to find in the rest of my presentation here that that's actually not the case in many cases. So they showed us that we might want to look at using permeable paving on the entire parking lot. By the way, I'll point out that as everybody was quickly developing their plans for this, quickly discovered in that 3-hour design period how much the parking dictates the entire project, if they didn't know it already. Some of the projects didn't meet the parking requirement. They were really nice designs, but they fell a little bit short, so we couldn't use those. So this project here, clearly from a sustainability point of view, which this was not just about cost analysis. I think we all know that sustainability is about not only economics, but it's about the environment and the social well-being. So part of social well-being is how do we create spaces that bring people together? How do we create spaces that allow people to appreciate the landscape? So this and some of the other designs created a nice little courtyard in here. And even if you have to park down here, well, at least you get a little bit of exercise and you can walk through a nice landscape through here. So with that, I'd like to talk about the numbers. One of the reasons I'm presenting right now, right after the break, was because the next 4 slides are just numbers. And I was afraid that you would fall asleep if I put this at the very end. So remember when I said I could cry easily? If I see somebody sleeping, man, don't do that. It'll just send me over the edge. So I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but on this one, I want to go over each line item. The first line item is asphalt paving and curb and gutter and the ribbon gutter. So you'll see that we have a unit cost of about $465. Once again, I'm going to interrupt myself because I forgot to say an important thing. Putting these numbers together, we worked with Seth Seaton from Belgard and John Coffey from Coffey Engineering, and to put some of these numbers together. The other thing I want to add to this is that we really do welcome your thoughts on these. If you have a big gripe about some of the unit costs, let us know. We want to just make this better. We want it to be accurate, because eventually we're going to put this on the ASLA website for everybody to go to. We're hoping to get it up in about a week. And then we'll continue to add to this type of information so that the ASLA San Diego chapter's website will be a go-to place for sustainable issues. It'll be a nice resource. So at $465 and 203,000 square feet of parking, it's a lot of parking, we've got a cost of $946,000, almost $1 million. Then the second line is a liner. Now you'll notice that the quantity is 0. By the way, can everybody read these numbers? Okay. So you'll see that the quantity is 0. It still has a unit price. The reason we put it in there is because that line item gets a quantity in some of the other spreadsheets. So we want to make it very easy for you when you look at this in more detail to do an accurate comparison. That liner we heard Chuck talk about is what's going to go underneath the parking lot. Very often the geotech is going to be recommending that so we can keep the water from going underneath the building. It causes havoc sometimes for the landscape architects and growing plants, but that's what the geotechs are recommending, and so that's up to now. Anyway, that's what's going to have to happen until we can find a solution. Maybe that solution is going to be discovered today. Then the filtration, the bioretention areas, the detention basins. So with an asphalt parking lot, more than likely on most projects, we're going to have a detention basin. And so for this project, we had a 24,500 square foot detention basin, which is actually a little bit on the small side for this site, at about $4 a square foot. Then we have a pump system. If we have to, depending on the topography of the site, we may have to pump this water at about $30,000. Now, to create this detention basin, we've got to excavate, maybe export that soil at a cost. And that's going to be about another $33,000. What if we have to use underground storage? Well, we've got a line item for that, a huge line item of $350,000. And then all the pipe system that would be inherent in a paved parking lot, a non-permeable paved parking lot. We have to convey the water somehow, and very often, most of the time, it's used with pipe. So we've got 36-inch drain line, 24-inch drain line, and so on, as you can see. And then when we get down to line 12, we have, at 12 and 13, we have perforated pipe that will be incorporated into the design if we use permeable pavers. Those will show up on the next spreadsheets. Then minor drain box cleanouts, major drain box cleanouts. I don't want to kind of rush through all that. Attenuation control structures, head wall discharge structures, additional protective cutoff wall barriers, and then the last line item, miscellaneous drainage facilities. That's for just little things that we may have left out in this calculation. It may be looked at as more kind of a contingency on there. So the cost of developing the parking lot for this project, we kind of skipped looking at the original site because actually our square footage of paving went down in this more efficient design, which goes to show you a little bit of the value of brainstorming, and this happened in 3 hours. I bring that up because how many of us, especially the landscape architects, wish that we could be involved in the project earlier on and brainstorm with the civil engineer before they get too far down the path of no return, because they don't want to redo the design based on our comments. The client doesn't want to pay them to redo it. We don't want to point it out to the client that we think it could be done a little bit better, right or wrong, because we don't want to make the civil look bad. And the civil doesn't want to make us look bad. So if we're all together in the beginning, it will make a much better project. And even though the client may think that it... Thank you. I think everybody in here would agree, but I don't know how many... Do we have any developers here? We did invite some. Dang. I was really hoping they'd hear that, especially the applause. But we need to get the word out. So you civils that get hired right away, and when you're talking to your client, talk to them about how valuable the landscape architects would be coming to the table right away, and how it might be more money in the very beginning. I've already diverted from my presentation, but I do that anyway because I've got the microphone. It takes longer for you guys to get to that to shut me up. But we think that it will save the client more money in the long run. It's going to be more money in the beginning, but not only will it save them money, but we think it'll be a more creative solution. I'm not discounting the civils. They have a much better knowledge than we do of the technical aspects, but we need to be working together. So, that being said, let's move on to the first scenario. The first scenario is with clay soils and permeable pavers. Now, the second and third scenarios is with moderate draining soils and sandy soils. Now, before I go over these details, I want to point out that the reason we have done this is, again, we're going to have this on our website. We want it to be a place for everybody here, anybody in the country or the world to go to look at a scenario that might closely resemble what they are dealing with. Now, we understand that a lot of the line items or some of the line items on these spreadsheets may not apply to your project, but it's kind of a general checklist of things that you want to be thinking about. So on your particular project, if you see the things that you think are similar, you can latch on to these. The things that are different, and there will be things that are different on your project, you understand how to interpret this. And one of the benefits of this is that it will give you a head start as to thinking about, is it worth taking the time, especially with whatever fee you've been given, is it worth taking the time to look at the viability of permeable pavers or permeable pavement? Pavers are not always the answer, but is it worth spending that time? I think you get the idea. And I want to say again, I can take the criticism. If you want to critique the heck out of this, we would actually welcome it. So on the next three slides, you're going to see rows of green and yellow and white. The white rows didn't change at all. The yellow rows, those are numbers that went up compared to the asphalt parking lot. And the green rows with the red numbers and the total, they went down. I picked green just for green sustainability. I thought that was incredibly clever of me. I shared that with my wife, and she agreed, so I know it's true. What's that? Yeah, oh, yes, and subconsciously, didn't realize until Sharon May pointed out, it's dollars saved. So if we look at the first line item, well, actually, I'm going to go back. The first line item, the parking lot to the asphalt, curb, gutter, and ribbon gutter, that was $946,000. And I also need to point out the asterisk on the bottom. That cost of $465 is the asphalt, but it's also the curb, gutter, and ribbon gutter beyond what would have been installed for a permeable pavement parking lot. So there will be some curb and gutter in the permeable, or not gutter, there'll be some curb in the permeable pavement, but we don't need a gutter. The gutter is usually used, in case you don't know, to convey the water, send the water to another place. Well, we're going to be sending the water below the pavement, so we don't need that gutter. We also don't need the ribbon gutter. However, the cost went up to over $1 million. And the difference was $246,000. Now, what happens very often when you're talking to the client about the idea of using permeable pavers or some other type of sustainable material, they'll say, well, that's a lot more expensive. Why would I do that? How many parking lots do you see that are 100% permeable pavers? And they would be accurate. Wow, I've got 5 minutes to go before questions. They would be accurate, except they're looking at a small snippet of the real situation. They haven't looked at what they don't have to build. They haven't looked at the costs that are now eliminated. Now, there are several, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 5 yellow lines. So there are 5 line items that have gone up. Now we have to use a liner that we didn't have to use. Well, I'm sorry, we are using a liner, but that cost has gone up. The filtration, we're still going to have a detention basin because with the clay soils, we still have to address that just as much. However, looking at line 4, now we don't need a pump system because we can take care of this underneath the paving. We no longer need to rely on underground storage detention basin. So now we've cut off $350,000. We have totally eliminated the 36-inch drain line. That's $122,000. All that stuff underground that we don't see. Most of you are aware of that, but those are big dollar numbers. However, we've also gone up in price because now we have to add the 4-inch perforated PVC collectors. And we also have additional protective cutoff wall barriers. However, with all the additional numbers, by the fact that we have reduced some of the other things, we have already reduced it by 4.5% under clay soil condition. So that's pretty good. This doesn't even address the fact that now the owner of this project doesn't have to come back in 4 or 5 years to reseal the asphalt. What if this number had been higher? What if we still weren't saving money? I would contend that the client would still save money in 4 or 5 years because now they don't have to reseal this product, the pavers. At about, I think it's about $1.25 to reseal it. That would have made up the difference right there. So we're looking pretty good now. And now we've got a really cool parking lot. So now what if we had it on moderate soils, moderate draining soils, which is very common here in San Diego? Well, I'm just going to jump down to the bottom. Now we've saved 15%. We've saved $293,000 on this 11-acre project. The number of green lines now has gone up compared to the first one with clay soils. This one we had 1, 2, 3, 5 lines. This one we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Basically, I'm proving that I can count. But we have a lot more numbers, a lot more line items that are affected by this in the positive direction, positive as in saving money. And then finally, the sandy soils, the savings is huge. Now, of course, in San Diego, we don't have that many opportunities to take advantage of that, but we do have some. And this is really an easy argument to make, assuming that our numbers are correct. So now I have to refer to my notes to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. I'd like to point out that some of the other savings by using the permeable pavers, beyond the fact that we don't have to seal it later on, if you have to make a repair, it's easy. You just pull out some of the pavers and replace it. How many times have we seen parking lots where you see that ugly extra black fluid? Somebody in here knows the name of that stuff, that sealer that fills in the cracks. And after enough rain, the asphalt starts to break up, and you've got these patches all over the place. And then the only place you're left with attractive paving is maybe some of that, quote, special paving, the accent at the entrance or the entrance to the building. Now with permeable pavers, as a viable solution to the design, we can do some nice detail at the entryways, maybe have a simpler thing. I have less than a minute left before I entertain questions, but I'd like to remind everybody that this used permeable pavers over the entire parking lot. A lot of us have seen permeable pavers used in parking lots. For some reason, people are using it in the parking spaces. And then they're using concrete or asphalt in the drive aisles. Because there's thought that you need that for the structural stability, for fire trucks, for example, or dump trucks. But proper installation of the permeable pavers can handle all of that. And it actually becomes more expensive if you break it up into two different materials because you have two setup costs. And I've gotten the big end sign, which actually works out pretty well, I think. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'd like to entertain any questions, comments, criticisms, but I'd like to point out that Dan Valdez with Coffee Engineering is here to help me answer questions, as well as Seth again. So again, if you have questions or comments, criticism, please come up to the microphones here. I feel like a flight attendant. Here, here, here. And ask away. Yeah.
I have two quick questions. One is, on the spreadsheet, one of the big ticket things was the underground storage and detention system.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering why that would be needed if you already have a detention basin planned. Because that was a $350,000 item. So
that's huge.
Just available area for use for surface storage.
Oh, okay.
You may not have enough.
You may not have the landscape area.
You didn't have enough detention, so you needed to store some underground. That's right. What you assumed? Okay. The other thing is, I guess this would be for Seth, is I haven't come across pavers that only cost $5.86, including all the sub-base that you need. So I just wanted to know where that came from.
Great question. Thank you very much for asking that. Can everybody hear me?
Seth, use the mic. I know you're a loudmouth, but...
Can everybody hear me now? Okay, so the 586. Now, we looked at this particular project, and it was a large area, as you all seen in the actual plan. Now, for that type of installation, we would eliminate the aspect of hand install. This would be driven by mechanical installation, which therefore would provide for more cost-efficient ways to install that project. And you've also mentioned, Tim, the cross-section, right? Well, that cross-section, we used conservative. We were still looking at a 21 inches. But we can actually cut that 21-inch cross-section in the parking stalls that would offset that as well from an aggregate cost in raw materials. So that's pretty much why you're able to be cost-effective and hit that 586 from a mechanical installation point. Thank you, Tim.
What would it be if it was a real small area, say, the size of half of the room or something like that?
That's $100 a square foot now.
Yes. That'll be your firstborn.
Just the range. Is it more like 10,000?
There is a range. When you look at smaller areas, they're most likely going to be driven by hand installation practices. Right. And that's where your price is going to go up. Usually anything around 10,000 square feet below, I look at an average about $9. Okay. That's what you're looking at on base. But the real point is, when you address the use of development for retail spaces and larger areas where you guys have parking lots when you're designing these jobs, that become a headache. And this is where you're really going to capitalize on the development and be more profitable for your clients by utilizing the permeable pavers in the streets, all the parking areas, the drive aisles, large volume jobs. That's where you're going to see the big savings.
I'd like to add to that right before your question that what I've found is that the large part of the rest of the country is way ahead of us in the use of permeable pavers, partly because they get a lot more rain. And consequently, we don't have a lot of contractors out here that understand that we can have these installed mechanically, and that's where the savings comes in a lot. So.
I just wanted to say it may be more cost-effective than off-site mitigation as well.
Oh, Stephanie, you probably didn't hear that. Stephanie said that it may be cost-effective. I've already forgotten what you just said. from the off-site mitigation point as well. The other, thank you for being patient. The other item to remember is that if we can eliminate the detention basin, now that's more buildable area for the developer. Now, the landscape architects would love to make that landscape, but the builder can now build more square footage to lease out or to sell. Okay.
Hi, Erica Ryan, City of San Marcos, and I want to address the drive aisles with the permeable paver. It does boil down to the fire department. So I'm actually posing a question if there's some lead that can be taken locally, whereby there's an example or a standard that's set up that the fire departments will buy off on. That's the problem in land development and getting that through. So it's not really a decision making, it's a comfort level that they can do that. They will not give up on fire standards, obviously, for safety reasons. So that's just a comment.
Okay.
Seth, do you want to address
that?
No,
thank you. In fact, Chuck, we actually just recently addressed, you just had a meeting, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, with the new guidelines for creating streets with the PICPs.
Yeah, the loading, the structural loading for pavers is already proven. We have, like in Tennessee, the entire fire station is done with pavers for permeable. But here it becomes a skid issue or slip issue for suction has been. But we have several areas that have already been improved throughout California for fire trucks.
We need one here in San Diego County. That's the problem.
We'll get it for you, girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Go ahead. Now that your mouth's full. Well, go ahead, Marion, while she finishes her candy.
So just a quick question. Without the curb and gutter, would you need curb stops? The cost of curb stops in there?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
But do remember that with the permeable pavers, there still will be a curb. It'll just likely be a low, depressed curb. But yes, you would have the cost of the tire stops. So actually, thank you for bringing that up. We need to add that in. Yes.
So this, the point of this is to show an LID method that saves money right up front, but it's obviously only looking at one method, which
right.
We've had a lot. We use bioretention mostly. So have you?
I'm sorry, you use what?
Bioretention.
Oh yes,
areas.
yeah, right.
Not necessarily one big basin or anything, but all the planters all around the building, bioretention areas, pretty much everywhere, a lot of places. So, have you considered, or will you guys do the same thing on the same site, looking to see if all those planters were bioretention?
Yes, we would. But the beauty of that is that the planters, even without, well, I would see the planters being bioretentions as just icing on the cake.
Well, you can get rid of the, it is the filtration system, and it can also serve as the detention system too. So
right.
It pretty much cuts a lot of those.
Yeah,
costs.
You're right, right. And you're right. I'm glad you recognize that we haven't gotten to that phase. That'll be at the next phase or the second one after that. Thank you. Any other? Gosh, nobody raked it over the coals. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I would next like to look at my notes again and introduce Michelle Landis from De Lorenzo International. Now we're going to begin 4 presentations from 4 different landscape architects. Some of them have engineers with them to discuss this. And we're going to see some more interesting solutions rather than just numbers. Thank you.
So thank you, Tim. Before we start into the kind of case studies of what some of these projects might look like and some of the lid and best management practices, I'd like to say thank you to Tim, because Tim stepped into a huge role as our stewardship chair. Marion Marum was our leader in implementing this first stewardship committee in the nation. And under Marion's watch, we developed guidelines to help other chapters implement something similar. And so when she completed that task, she handed it off to Tim, who was our kind of willing person to lead us. And Tim has gone above and beyond in carrying this kind of mission of education. And Tim, I know you work hard in addition to your practice. I just want you to know it's not a thankless job. We all really appreciate everything you bring to the table. So today I've brought Erin Sweeney from Berger ABAM. They were Florist Lund before they changed their name or got bought out. And we wanted to talk a little bit about the replacement naval hospital at Camp Pendleton. And this has been a really great opportunity for our firm to be involved with in the design of and for the region. My design build contractor tells me it is the largest new construction Recovery Act project in the nation. And our contractors, I'm sure a lot of them have been talking about working on this project. It's put thousands of contractors to work here locally. It's a 58-acre site that includes sensitive riparian and vernal pool habitats. And it's scheduled to open this winter in 2013 ahead of schedule. And I wanted to comment a little bit on, Tim brought up a comment that we like to be involved early on in the process. And sometimes we're kind of, as landscape architects, at the end where we are delegated planting and irrigation and don't have a say in the site plan. And this was an unusual project in that we were kind of given a design, but the military had put a rider in that the landscape architects needed to basically redesign the whole site. So certain elements, the building couldn't move, some of the detention areas could not move, but the site was all open for play. And we had really the support of our civil engineers in saying, okay, everybody else is at 65%, we're going to start over. So there were some tough moments there, but I think we've got a really great project, and there were just some really wonderful low-impact development elements that include conserving our natural areas, some vegetated roofs, permeable paving, and disconnecting some of our impervious surfaces. No? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about conserving our natural areas. We had 0.65 acres of vernal pool, and you can see this picture that has the blue sky is the vernal pool taken a couple weeks ago, so it has survived the construction process. Also, we have the Waters of the U.S. channel running right through the sites. So really was there was a team effort with our civil engineers to minimize grading, but also a real team effort with our contractors to preserve those areas and make sure their people stayed out. And at every safety meeting they held every day, they talked about you cannot go in there, you cannot play around in there, you cannot eat lunch in there, there's animals in there, and they did a great job helping everybody understand that we needed to stay out of that area. We have 3 acres of the waters of the U.S. that is protected and restored, and about 5 acres we had planned for a larger area in the lower right-hand corner there. They've since developed a helipad landing there, so that is a separate project. And then we have a vegetated roof. So I hear a lot of people talk about how vegetated roofs aren't truly sustainable in an arid climate. And I would agree that there are significant challenges to vegetated roofs in an arid climate. Again, partnering closely with our MEP team and our structural team, we overcame a lot of challenges with the vegetated roof that we inherited. We have about 1.5 acres of total vegetated roofs. And I think what's unique about this project is we're using them to, hold some of the water on site, provide maybe some small habitat areas. I did see pollinators and bees up on the roof now that it's newly planted. But about 90% of the roofs are in key view areas. So we have lots of little segmented roofs and then a big, almost 1 acre roof at the very top of the building. But even in that very top roof, the top floor projects up through it. So in this hospital, if you're in a waiting room or a patient's room, you look out and you see a green ground plane. And I think that's really important in a hospital environment. And it's, maybe not the best low-impact development, certainly not the cheapest low-impact development measure, but I think there's a sustainable environment that it provides to people in the general area. We've overcome a lot of challenges on this roof, having to do with soils, the water supply, the depth of the soils. Structure had already signed off on the building, so we are stuck with 4 inches of soil, which is a disaster in an arid climate. So we've done a lot of work with our design build contractors to overcome some of those challenges. But all in all, it's newly in, it's growing well. One unusual challenge that we did not anticipate is that with all the high efficiency glass that is going in the building, we call that the magnifying glass, and you can see where the big patch of rock is, 210 degrees in that location. So we could not plant our entire ellipse. It was actually melting the foam as our contractors were trying to install it. So we have decorative rock there now. So, and we were planning for a very shady environment under a bridge, and we ended up with it being nuked. So, okay. And then we heard a lot about permeable pavement design today. So it is, yes. And because I teach at Southwestern, I'm always trying to document things for my students because I want them to understand it's not just about this surface pretty colored brick that you pick out of a catalog with a little swatch, but what happens underneath. And we have pretty poor drainage on this site. And I don't know if you want to run through some of this.
Sure. So we were putting the permeable pavers sort of around the perimeter of the site where things would drain towards them for the most part. In these pictures that Michelle took, you can see the subsection being prepared and the rock being installed, and maybe we could have used permeable pavers throughout the parking lot, but we just have them around the edge here. And then on the lower left, you can kind of see what the finished product looked like. Shall we move on?
Well, and so I think at the end of the, I think this was a very close relationship with Civil, and that these details went back and forth. So we picked out the pretty pavers at the top, and we were working closely with them on the underlaying system and making sure that it was all cohesive. We have like 0.6 acres of permeable pavers here.
Yeah, and before you move on, another thing here is this is class type D soil, so we didn't have an opportunity to infiltrate with anything. We were definitely needing to line it and redirect flow to the waters of the U.S. or the vernal pool, well, not the vernal pool, but the waters of the U.S.
And then I see we have our little end thing. So real quickly, the last thing is we're intercepting our impermeable surfaces and redirecting. You know, Civil said, why do we have trees in our bioswales? So we had to work very closely to accommodate that condition, pass some of those details and specifications back and forth.
Yes. So we went back and forth with locating the trees and the lighting and the underground storm drain system so they weren't conflicting with each other, and the curb lines and so forth. So that was nice to have those conversations before we were in front of the client and kind of get the aha moment, not with the whole team, but just amongst ourselves beforehand.
Yeah, and hopefully you get a chance to see it. It'll have some great kind of details in there. So I would like to introduce the next case study up, and this is the URS team of Patricia, Kaja, and Nicole. Thank you.
Okay, stormwater, low impact development, site planning, and design implementation opportunities. I want to tell you a little bit about a project that Nicole and I are working on. This is for the city of San Diego, the Stormwater Division. And what I really appreciated about this project is the synergy that's starting to occur between the landscape architects and the civil engineers. And I'm noticing this not only in my office because, you know, in the beginning this project was being done by the civil engineers, and the city actually said, you know, you need to start bringing the landscape architects into this project. But also within the city, because this is, you know, a project where we started out with the storm drain division, and you know, it's starting to expand, and we're starting to work with other departments. So I can see some of the landscape architects from the city. I can see some of that passion coming out, and you know, what they feel very strongly about and whatnot. But we all know that you know, that landscape architects and civil engineers, we approach design very differently. Civil engineers are very quantitative. You know, they're figuring out the flow. It's Q equals CIA. and they want to figure out the capacity. And so they have all this data, and then, they give it to us, and we want to come up with all these fun concepts. And so you can see that we really kind of, professionally speaking, we need each other. The civil engineer is probably not going to feel comfortable looking at an agricultural soil analysis and making a determination on how to amend the soil. And on the other hand, we aren't experts at stormwater, now I'm forgetting the name already, stormwater source control, or the TMDLs. So just a few words of wisdom for landscape architects. Get informed, become knowledgeable of the MS4 permit and the regulations, understand the acronyms, and ask the right questions. And a few words of wisdom for the civil engineers. Understand your abilities and your strengths, and allow the landscape architect to take the lead on the different areas that they're specialists in, which would be site design, planting requirements, and the aesthetics of the project. So just a little bit more about this actual project. Right now, what we're doing, well, let me step back for a second. Prior to URS coming on and working on this project, there was another planning firm that started to look at all of the documentation that the city has that you typically would look at as you're developing a project. So this other firm looked at the general plan, it looked at the different community plans, it looked at the land development manual, and they started to identify all those locations where there's currently barriers in the policies and regulations that won't allow you to implement LIDs on your project. So what URS is now tasked with is taking all that information and starting to prioritize it. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the project.
All right, so the purpose of this study, really the main driver behind it for the city is the establishment of TMDLs in the various water bodies. This has led to the creation of the comprehensive load reduction plans, and those are created to help the city and the other jurisdictions achieve compliance. The clerks identify 2 non-structural BMPs to facilitate LID implementation, which is what this project was focused on. And the big thing for this project was amending zoning and other development regulations. URS worked with the city to provide the steps to implement policy and code changes, to provide more guidance on the LID measures, and to provide the framework for efficient and effective plan review and practices. The desired outcomes of these changes to policy and other regulations is to meet the following LID goals: to minimize affected and connected impervious areas, to preserve and enhance the hydrologic function of the unpaved areas, to harvest rainwater, to allow and encourage multi-use stormwater controls, and to promote stormwater source control through the codes and regulations. And now Patricia is going to give a little more detail on the implementation strategy.
Okay, so as far as the implementation strategy, what we're talking about is really using the framework that the city has in place currently. So we're not talking about creating yet another document that you need to kind of compile and address. And in the prioritization, some of the items that we're looking at more closely initially are the regional standard drawings, and then also the landscape section. So, and we want to take a proactive approach. So we're not very far along in this, so I can't really say a whole lot. But one of the things that we're going to try to do is, with the landscape regulations, you get points for doing different things. And so what we'll be promoting is that you get points for implementing LID design concepts. So stay tuned. So now what I want to do is turn this over to Kasia Trojanoska, and she's going to tell you about another one of our projects, the San Diego International Airport Terminal 2 expansion, and some of the LIDs we were able to implement.
And I know we have very little time, so we're going to just speed up through it. So the Greenbelt San Diego International Airport project is the largest expansion in the history of the Airport Authority. It started in 2009 and will be open officially next month. The cost of the whole project, the construction and design, was $1 billion, where the project was divided into two contracts. Contract one, the construction of the terminal, and contract two, the landside improvements. So the Greenbelt contract two, where URS was a lead designer, and includes the elevated departure roadways, 2 pavilions, the brand new USO building and Transit Plaza, and also some sustainable landside improvements. The dual roadway will relieve the curb traffic congestion and by separating passengers associated with arrivals and departure. And the pavilions will allow passengers to check in, to check their luggage, and to print their boarding passes before even entering the terminal. The project is designed to achieve the LEED Gold certification by using some of the green design principles, like natural ventilation, stormwater management, a reduction of the heat island effect, as well as using recycled materials and some renewable resources. The low-impact development solutions that were used on this project can be easily categorized in 3 groups: permeable materials, bioswale bioretention, and appropriate plant material. And Nicole, give us highlights of those solutions that we used.
Okay, now we're going to do a little flying through because we already got the end sign. I think everybody here understands that there's significant issues with implementing LID on a redevelopment project, and especially a project with as much paved surface as this one has. The pavers were a big part of helping us meet the project goals, and we installed about 30,000 square feet of pavers in the parking lot, and it infiltrates, well, it has the capacity to infiltrate about 24,000 cubic feet of rainwater. Another technique we used on this was to create curb cuts in the curb along the Transit Plaza. It allowed the water to go into the vegetated areas and the swale without impacting traffic safety. Now we've got, we also did at-grade curbs to encourage infiltration into the landscaped areas. It allowed the stormwater to run off and filter the water. It also supplement irrigation. And it maximized the parking and pedestrian access. We also used the bioswales and bioretention. You saw a little bit on the last slide. Each of them was used based off of the hydraulic conditions as well as the available area. So in the bioretention areas, we were able to raise the grates up several inches to encourage infiltration, but also meet all of our flood control needs. And the cobble was used along the main flow line to reduce the stormwater velocities and also provide erosion protection. And we've got a few more examples of our bioswales and bioretention. Overall in the project, we had 5 bioretention areas. We had 13 bioswales. Over 50% of the project area was treated by LID, which I was a little surprised when I saw that number. We maximized the use everywhere we could. It was a team effort. We still had to use some of the vault type BMPs on site, but they were a much smaller size. It just proves that with early planning, the LID solutions can help reduce the need for storm drain infrastructure, and it can also be a cost-effective solution. And now Kasha's going to talk about plant materials.
There's just 2 more slides, I promise. So our plant material was very carefully selected for this project. We hope to, and I think we achieved, very contemporary look while we're still blended with the existing environment, and we avoided turf for water demand. So we use some informal clusters of drought-tolerant trees and shrubs. The planting palette was also picked to support some environmental processes going in the site. Some of them was water conservation, of course, the bioremediation by using the right plant in the bioswales and bioretention basins, erosion control and heat island effect, especially on the parking lots where we finally were able to use some canopy trees, which that was not the case from the very beginning. We kind of had to have discussions about that. We use drip irrigation with some bubblers on the site, and this project is the largest drip installation in the San Diego County. And together with the weather-based controller that kind of self-adjusts the time that the valves runs, it creates very efficient system in regards to water use. So with that, I would like you all to invite to the airport, official opening next month, and happy traveling. And right now, our next speaker is our fellow landscape architect, Laura Burnett, and she will talk about public open space implementation plan.
You all need to zoom out. This is a different project. We don't have any gravel in the ground. This is at a conceptual level. We're just missing a little bit of funding and justification. I want to point out that I think that this is trying to be an integrated systems approach, which we all learn about in school, and integrated is always a better thing to do. And I want to introduce a new acronym, which is Green Rights of Way. We would like to blow the green streets and complete streets and all those things out of the water with a complete green rights of way. And before I get into too much trouble, certainly want to thank James and along with the city for being the one encouraging, consistent source with the city. In working on this project, my engineers have not really stepped up because our project, the funding was discontinued or put off for a little while. So we don't really have all of the numbers. So I won't be competing with Jim about any numbers. What we wanted to do as a park project, as all of us landscape architects wanted to do, is in this integrated idea, we came up with this umbrella sort of theme, the vision for the project, which is health. And certainly to all of us, mom and apple pie, and health is very obvious. But that had to be the most fundamental component of that. Certainly health with personally, economically, culturally, and what we want to speak about today is environmentally, and how all of those things come together in this one downtown project. The idea is looking at downtown. I don't know how many of you all live, work, or visit downtown like you are today, but this is San Diego's downtown. Part of the problem is there's not enough park space, just like many of our neighborhoods in San Diego, not enough park space for the neighborhoods, for the residents in downtown. If you were to apply the state requirements, that green square in the middle is about the amount of park. Even though we have Balboa Park and all the water and all those sorts of things, we still need that much park space. Also, another group of issues certainly has everything to do with the water quality, knowing that the bay is very, very polluted. Stephanie left. Oh, no, she is. She just came back. Oop, caught her. But she brought up, or the question was brought up about the stormwater and urban flushing in downtown and urban areas. I had read somewhere that San Diego Bay is maybe still the most polluted, or the second most polluted bay in the world after somewhere in New Jersey. I'm not certain if that's true, but it's a certain fun fact. Has everything to do with the Navy and painting of boats, but certainly the urban runoff contributes significantly to that. And how can a park system contribute to that? What we did was came up with an idea that we're calling Green Rights of Way. I can't point out exactly where we are sitting right now, but many of you get the idea that there are these, taking these 6 streets that crisscross downtown San Diego and in effect, and adding typical park facilities to serve the needs of the residents and visitors. So let me describe what that means. Another component of it, of course, is the water pollution. One of our students, recent graduate Josh Sanders, discovered this from Weston. The pollutants that have been studied and how they figure into San Diego Bay. So as you can see, this watershed area reaches up into North Park through Balboa Park and across downtown San Diego. And the pollutants that you see, the pollutants of concern that are listed there on the side, and how those are being monitored in downtown San Diego as they reach into the bay. Looking backwards into the, well, not backwards, to the very obvious natural topography, how the stormwater used to come across the area, those two large waterfronts, the storm inlets, where that water is collected and where it dumps into the bay, with the red dots and the little yellow dots of where the outfalls are. This idea of green rights-of-way, where these areas could actually pick up, collect stormwater, cleanse it, and reuse it before it's released back into the bay. So the idea of this green rights-of-way, typically our rights-of-way in downtown San Diego are 80 feet wide. When the Horton era set up downtown San Diego, all of the streets except for about 3 were typically 80-foot wide right-of-way. Property we, the citizens of San Diego, own. The idea is, of those 6 streets that we pointed out in the earlier diagram, to take out about 32 feet and dig up the pavement, remove that pavement in 20-some feet of that. Certainly still have the parking, 2 travel lanes, bike lanes, but most importantly have this large planting area that, again, you could have all of these typical park, public park facilities of jogging paths, of small play areas for children, dog parks, all those sorts of things. And the idea of how much stormwater could that collect. This is certainly where the engineers got busy and did other things besides working with me on this type of thing to really get you the numbers. So I come up with, I can do my own math and trying to devise and see, you know, what amount of water is it going to take? What sorts of things can we solve? How can we get the right people's attention to be able to make this into a real project? So in my calculation of that, this system, it would be about 4 miles of parks and trails crisscrossing downtown, almost 10 to 16 acres of parkland. So using a structural soil, looking at the porosity and that sort of thing, you know, you can come up with, do some back of the napkin math and come up with significant amounts of stormwater that can be collected. Haven't exactly figured out what the stormwater is that comes across that area, but I, you know, do these numbers. Does 750,000 cubic feet of stormwater, is that something that we can, enough to get your attention that we can start to do something with that? Good, Stephanie's agreeing. Good, so with that, I will conclude and introduce Matthew Clements.
Good afternoon, my name is Matt Clemens. I'm with Garbini and Garbini Landscape Architecture. To the left of me is Merrill Taylor with Tetra Tech, and my colleague Mike Schnell, he's also with Garbini and Garbini. I will be presenting to you on LID visualization and implementation. We work with the City of San Diego and Tetra Tech, who are the prime consultants on the project. The first project is the City of San Diego Design Manual. The second project was conceptual lid designs with the City of San Diego, and Bannock Avenue neighborhood streetscapes with the City of San Diego. The overall goal of the manual is to assist in design and implementation of the stormwater lid practices. Our role was to create a list, a matrix for lid areas, and to create photo simulations specific to San Diego. The image that you see up there is here in San Diego on Pacific Highway, and what we're showing there is a bioretention area along the right-of-way, and showing plants that are from the list that was created in the design manual. For the plant list for the City of San Diego, it was basically developed to provide a starting point for selecting plants capable of surviving temporary inundation or flooding in the City of San Diego. Plants selected for the list have been documented by other sources as surviving flooding, temporary flooding. Sources were included university studies, nursery lists, and other LID manuals throughout the U.S., and many hours my colleague Mike had with the biologists of the city of San Diego. Based on the research that was done for this criteria that was developed, there's a list, sorry. Plans for LID structures of varying storage depths and holding durations. Plants for bottom of swells that can take ample year-round moisture. Plants that require little or no semi-irrigation, but which can handle brief inundations or wet soils during winter. Plants that require little maintenance. Plants that can be mown down once or twice a year. Non-invasive species that maintain ecological health downstream. And spreading ground covers that are economical for large areas. Also species that lend themselves well to streetscapes, parks, and other high visibility areas. Public approval of the aesthetic quality should help improve the overall perception of low impact development. So this is the criteria used in all three of the designs for all three of the projects. On to the next slide, you'll possibly notice that this is right here outside of the hotel on J Street. It's an existing view there. And the next slide is a photo simulation of what could be done, showing permeable pavement, pedestrian strip, and a curb cut into the bioretention areas. You'll notice that it's slightly enhanced with the verticality of the photo simulation. On to the next slide is the next project with the City of San Diego. The 4 diverse locations were chosen by Tetra Tech and the city to illustrate different LID configurations, and we've developed the photo simulations for those specific sites. And plant lists were also developed for each site. The designs will aid staff to determine future LID strategies and possible pilot projects. The site visualizations and plant materials options may eventually be used in discussions with stakeholder groups, including home and business owners. You'll see above is the existing street in San Diego, and the bottom photo simulation showing LID plant material that is in the existing design manual, and permeable pavement along the parking areas, and the bioretention. On to the next slide is the last project I'll be speaking about, the Bannock Avenue neighborhood streetscapes, which is, I just found out, it's a pilot project for the city of San Diego, and it was just awarded a bid. The bid was awarded, so that's good news. The project is located in a residential neighborhood in Claremont Mesa. The stormwater area drains into Tecolote Canyon and is part of the Mission Bay watershed. The city and prime consultant Tetra Tech studied area and located potential streetscapes within the vicinity of Bannock Avenue. We developed 3 thematic options for different streetscapes. The city and Tetra Tech narrowed locations and developed process for homeowner involvement. We developed 3 separate themes. Theme A is basically an informal planting parkway with intermediate LID approved plantings arranged in an informal pattern. It was originally called Cobblestone and Planting Parkways. Theme B was regenerative low grass parkways, lit approved grasses that spread by rhizomes and stolons to refill damaged areas, possibly in the retention areas, that don't require much mowing and which are either locally native or don't produce seed. The third theme C was formal planting parkways, lid plantings arranged in ordered geometric pattern, similar to a more traditional planting design. The image above was a development stage plan and showing a design statement, material imagery, and specific plant lists. And the image below is a photo simulation of what that could be, showing bioretention, pedestrian strip again, curb cuts, and appropriate plant material for that specific site. The next slide is the implementation plans created by Tetra Tech. The final designs incorporated homeowners' selections of plant choices from a list developed from the original design themes that we created. And by engaging homeowners in the selection of the plant material, it is anticipated that the LED planting will be better maintained and project better accepted by the community. This is an existing view on Manitou Way for the Bannock project, showing the existing parkway there. And this next slide is a photo simulation, again showing curb cuts into the bioretention and the appropriate LED approved plantings. And that is the end of the presentation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you guys very much. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you for everybody to show up. I'd like to give a special thanks to the city and county people that are here. You're the ones who review our plans and tell us what we have to do. So it's nice to give us an opportunity to talk with you. We are over our time frame, but I still want to make sure that people have some time to ask any questions or make some comments. So we can take a few minutes to do that. You don't have to, but yeah. Go ahead, Terry.
I'm Terry Lean with the City of San Diego in the landscape section. And what we're finding coming in is sort of a disturbing trend. This is actually very good you're having this meeting, but what I'm finding coming in are flow-through planters that are sealed on the sides, which I understand for lateral movement. They're also sealed on the bottom, and we've got a growing medium on plans proposed that is as little as 6 inches, and you cannot grow a tree in that. And it is not horticulturally remotely sustainable. So from an engineering standpoint, maybe those work, but not from a horticultural standpoint. And so I encourage the landscape architects here to be proactive about getting involved with the design process sooner. Our design manual that was referred to earlier recommends 2 to 4 feet as a minimum growing depth. I have yet to see a set of plans that provides 2 feet. It's been 18 inches, 12 inches, and 6 inches, and I keep fighting back. But it's, you know, if that's a sealed planter, that's what it is. It's a planter. It looks like it's in the ground, but it's not.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's an issue that true sustainability needs to look at the horticultural component of the living medium that you're working with.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Terry. I forgot to mention we have some panelists that came here to answer questions. They didn't make a presentation, but we had Robert Hawk from Terra Costa Consulting Group. Would you raise your hand or stand up? He's a civil engineer and a geotech. And Dan Valdez, who you met earlier. We were going to have Ken Cicillo, but he couldn't make it. In place of him, Trevor Alsop. So do you gentlemen have a response to Terry's comment? And feel free to come up here. Yeah, use the mic anywhere you want.
Hi, Terry. Rob Hawk. Actually, I was with the City of San Diego for 22 years. I'm both licensed in engineering geology, hydrogeology, and geotechnical engineering, so I kind of bring a broader view. And if you want to take something away from this, and not to rain on anybody's parade, unintended, from the geotechnical,
that's what this is for.
from the geotechnical standpoint, water is bad. Those 3 words pretty much describe it. On any infrastructure, water is bad. So you have to design your landscaping to work around that fact, or we're going to be replacing streets 2 to 3 times as rapidly as we will be under normal circumstances where everything is sealed. So to get back to Terry's comment, I agree that trees don't grow very well in very shallow planters, but we have to isolate the growing medium from the infrastructure, both municipal and from private buildings. There's a broad variety of reasons for that, not only degradation of the materials, from a litigation standpoint. Anytime you've got a municipal facility that contributes water to something, you're going to be sued over it. So those have to go into your calculations. You can have a beautiful landscaped area that's going to cause a lot of problems unless those 2 components work well together. So when you're working on these projects and you're designing them, you need to get together with your civils, your geotechnical staff, and try to get something that's going to work to make everything come together, the synergy that you're trying to get, the integration. So from Terry's standpoint, I know why they seal the planters, because they don't want the water to go in the ground.
So that's actually a perfect example of what we've been talking about earlier, and how these plans, thank you, Rob, the plans get sent to, or the design is sent to the landscape architect so far down the line, so much money has been spent on design fees, and we're stuck dealing with this thing. We're trying to get trees to grow in this small planter, and we know they're never going to grow to the height that they were intended to grow. So maybe if we were involved earlier to remind everybody of that, and how that's going to happen, I don't know yet, other than maybe the civils or the geotech say, you know, before we go any farther, let's bring the landscape architect in. I know this is self-serving, what I'm saying, but I think that it will help resolve that issue. Maybe we end up with less paving, or maybe we have a smaller building as a result of the need to get the larger trees in there that we want. So thanks for your comment, Rob. Yes?
I want to add to what you guys are talking about a little bit and tell you that I share your frustration. I'm one of the civils in the room. More civils? Any more civils? All right, yeah.
We want as many civils here as possible.
Afterwards, come to us and tell us your frustrations, your problems, and I just want to let you know we actually share a lot of those sometimes, because
sure.
Not the landscape architects, but the architects are the ones that are setting everything, right?
We did invite architects here.
They're the ones setting everything up and saying, you guys got to live with all this.
Are there any architects here?
Is there a regular architect?
Yeah.
But you know, the whole point here is, of course, we all need to work together more than ever. And there's one more person I want to add to the mix of that, and me and Marion have gone through this in a recent project with some fun, but that's the plumbing engineers. When it comes to the buildings, one of the, buyer retention, I think, is kind of one of the main things and what it's really all about. And when it comes to drainage out of the buildings and off the building roofs, the planters and the bioretention has to sync up with the building, and those just have to be synced up. So that's where the civil, as the civil, I say, guys, the roof has to drain on the planters. So the architect, the plumbing engineer, and the landscape architect figure that out, make it work. And there's not much else I can do other than tell you that the county is telling me that that has to be that way.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that.
We all really appreciate that comment. Yes, Chuck.
If I could, I'll give you something to think about as you walk away. We have problems, and we continue to do things the same way all the time. And I think insanity happens if you expect change and you don't change how you do things. I looked at the way we build roads. When you go to school, you're taught, roads don't like water. We use dense graded aggregate. But the problem with dense graded aggregate is it has small particles that, when they get wet, they plasticize and they move. And when you use open graded aggregate construction, they don't have those small particles. And so to get the best of both worlds, because your plants need oxygen and water, and the roads can actually be built with open graded aggregate. And if you don't understand the process, look at how railroads get built. And they've been working a long time. So as we move, I've done a lot of VUNRs, if you were VUNRs, where we do downtown areas and we improve the vegetation, plant, people, the quality of life issues. And I think that if we change our view in how we deal with how we build things, we've got to re-examine it, because quality of life is very important. And we can achieve all this if we work together and change maybe our viewpoints. And we do that through education. Having the ability to come here today has been a great pleasure for me. It's an honor to come talk to you, because I think that the civil engineers, I've worked with them for years, their mantra is, why should I design something for a city who won't accept it, for an owner who doesn't want it? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
But I do find that landscape architects, I find design professionals, I find civil engineers and developers who have, all the good sites are gone, so they're left with bad sites, and we're willing to look at alternative methods. And I think it starts, like I said earlier, you're the deciders. You make the difference. So we thank you for coming. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Chuck. How many planners do we have in the room? You just barely stuck your hand up. It's okay to be a planner. Any other planners besides the one guy in the pink shirt that doesn't want anybody to know? Oh, Stephanie's a planner. She whispered it. No, I agree. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, we're not quite done yet. We're almost there, but we're going to let Belgard have the final word in just a second. But I have two other announcements, Seth. Hold your horses. All right. First, I have to say, I cannot express my gratitude enough for everybody coming here. I think that this is the start of many great events that we'd like to hold. Just the short, brief discussions that we had at the very end with Chuck talking, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Chuck? John? And the other questions asked, that's exactly what we wanted. We need to not be afraid to say what the problems are to the people we think that are causing the problem. We may be wrong that they may not be the ones causing the problem, but they're the ones giving us the plans that we've got to deal with. So rather than just continue to bitch at our offices about the other people that are making our lives difficult, I invite you to come to more of these events that we'll be putting on. Now, that being said, everybody should have a comment, comment list or sheet. We really would appreciate you to fill that out before you leave. Answer as many questions on there as you can. We are going to have another event for sure, a kind of an extension of this one. And that will be based on what we've learned today. When we read your comments, things that we've learned from your questions. So ASLA wants to lead this discussion to bring us all together. And I really mean that. It's not just a feel-good thing I'm saying. So be a part of it. Let other civil engineers, other landscape architects know about it. Let the other geotechs know about it. Frankly, a lot of the challenges that I'm hearing from other landscape architects is that, what Robert talked about is the need to contain this water. How does Robert deal with his problem and not get sued and then allow us to deal with our issues? We've got to find a better way. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one. Two other people have something to share. Joey, look alive. She sent me an email yesterday asking if I could share something with you, but I wasn't sure how to get it into the PowerPoint right away. So go ahead.
Excuse me, I just learned about a webinar I thought might be interested to at least a portion of this group, and it's James Urban, who has a webinar on trees and stormwater. It will be free on July 24th from 11 to 12 Pacific time. And it's about using trees and soils in urban stormwater management. What I'm going to do is send the link to sign up for the webinar to the San Diego ASLA chapter website. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll do that Monday morning. I have read his books in the past. I thought he was really good, and I'm hoping this is great too, but the price is right. So.
All right. Thank you, Joey. And then Patricia would like to make an announcement about the golf tournament coming up on August 5th, I believe.
Okay, I think a lot of you know that we have a golf tournament every year, and the money that we get from the tournament goes to some organization or community within San Diego that wants to do some kind of landscape improvement. So it's a real good, feel-good type of day. It's, let's see, August 5th, and it's at the Loma Santa Fe Golf Club. And this year we dropped the price, so it's only $100. I'm not a golfer, but I'm going to be golfing. So, you know, I encourage all of you to think about going. We have a lot of sponsors that have stepped up and donated money, and the reason why they do this is because they want to interact with landscape architects in an informal way. So think about it. You know, if you have any other questions, you can talk to me upstairs, or you know, you can go on our website and find out more about it. Thank you.
Okay, and I know I've done this a couple times, but again, I want to thank Belgard for making this happen. A special thanks to Seth. I give him a real hard time as many times as I can, but that's only because I care about him. I appreciate what he's done for us. I appreciate what he's done for my practice in educating me, and I would recommend that you all take an opportunity to talk with him or any of the other Belgard representatives here. To be clear, we wanted to be very careful that this was not necessarily a commercial for Belgard, because we wanted you to really, we wanted credibility in what we were saying, that it wasn't just to represent Belgard. Truth is that a lot of what they have taught me came into this presentation. So I look forward to seeing everybody who's going up to the rooftop and socialize. Feel free to ask me any questions up there. And with that, I'm going to let Seth have the last words. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. Not only to our presenters, they did a wonderful job. I'd say we give them a round of applause for everybody. And thank you to each and one of you, for coming out here this evening. It was a great event. Look forward to working with the ASLA chapter so we can do more of these events and educational seminars, because obviously the more we know, the more we can do something about it. Thank you again. Look forward to many more of these to come, and have a wonderful evening. And if you want to come up to me or any of the Belgard staff, we'll be upstairs. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.